For decades, Audie Murphy was celebrated as the ultimate American hero, a farm boy who rose from poverty to become the most decorated U.S. soldier of World War II. He was the face of courage, the Hollywood heartthrob who embodied patriotism itself. But behind those medals and movie posters was a darkness he never escaped, a truth that the world is only now beginning to understand. Audie Murphy wasn't just fighting enemies overseas. He was fighting himself. Haunted by the horrors of war, sleepless nights, and the ghosts of fallen friends, he carried wounds that no one could see. While the public saw the smiling cowboy and the brave soldier, privately he battled something far more deadly: trauma, addiction, and the crushing weight of expectations he could never live up to. And yet, for years, the full story was hidden, buried beneath military honors and Hollywood contracts. His fans worshipped him, the government paraded him, and the studios built his legend. But the real Audie Murphy, the man behind the myth, was slowly unraveling. Now, decades later, investigators, friends, and historians have pieced together the truth about what really happened to America's favorite hero. What they found isn't just tragic, it's haunting. The mystery surrounding Audie Murphy's final years, his shocking behavior, and his untimely death reveal a man torn between glory and grief, honor and heartbreak. This is the story they didn't want you to know. The story of how the greatest soldier of his time became a prisoner of his own memories. The medals, the movies, the fame, none of it could save him from the one battle he could never win: the war within himself. Long before Audie Murphy became America's most decorated soldier, he was just a barefoot boy from rural Texas trying to survive. Born in 1925 in Kingston, Texas, Audie came into a world marked by poverty, hunger, and hardship. The seventh of 12 children, he grew up on a small farm where food was scarce and work was constant. His father drifted in and out of their lives, leaving his mother to raise the children alone through the Great Depression. Audie's childhood was anything but easy. He left school in the 5th grade to pick cotton, herd cattle, and do whatever jobs he could find to help feed his family. But even as a young boy, there was something fierce in him, a quiet fire that refused to be extinguished by circumstance. He was small, wiry, and often underestimated, but those who knew him said he had the heart of a lion. In 1940, tragedy struck when Audie's beloved mother, Josie Bell, passed away. Her death broke something inside him. Barely 16, he suddenly felt completely alone. Not long after, with World War II raging overseas, Audie saw the military as his only way out, a chance to find purpose, honor, and perhaps escape the poverty that had defined his life. He tried to enlist in the Marines. The Navy and the paratroopers, all of them rejected him for being underweight and too young. But Audie didn't give up. On his 17th birthday, he forged documents to appear older and managed to enlist in the U.S. Army. At just 5'5" and 110 pounds, few believed he'd last through basic training. They couldn't have been more wrong. From the moment he arrived, Murphy stood out, not for his size, but for his grit. He had an almost uncanny instinct for survival, and his determination inspired the men around him. He trained harder than anyone, refused to back down from any challenge, and quickly rose through the ranks. By 1943, he was deployed to North Africa and then to Italy, where his legend began. What followed was the kind of courage that would become the stuff of history books. During the invasion of Sicily, Audie distinguished himself in battle, showing an almost fearless calm under fire. Time and again, he risked his life to save his fellow soldiers, earning respect from men twice his age. But it was in France, during the campaign to push back German forces, that Audie Murphy became a legend. On January 26, 1945, near Holtzwihr, France, his unit was attacked by a large German force. With most of his men dead or wounded, Audie ordered the few survivors to fall back while he stayed behind. Alone, he climbed onto a burning tank destroyer, manned its machine gun, and single-handedly held off an entire company of German soldiers for nearly an hour, all while wounded. When reinforcements arrived, the battlefield was littered with enemy casualties. Murphy's bravery that day earned him the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States. But to his fellow soldiers, it wasn't the medal that mattered, it was the fact that he had saved their lives. By the end of the war, Audie Murphy had earned 33 awards and decorations, including every major U.S. combat medal, as well as honors from France and Belgium. He had become a national hero, the embodiment of courage, humility, and sacrifice. Yet even as the country celebrated him, Audie remained uncomfortable with fame. Reporters wanted stories of glory, but he spoke little about what he'd seen. He once said quietly, "There's nothing glorious about war, only death and destruction." When he returned home in 1945, the parades and cameras couldn't hide the truth. Murphy was haunted. Nightmares of the men he couldn't save, sudden rages, sleepless nights. The signs of what we now call PTSD were already there, but back then no one understood it. To the world, he was the war hero who had everything. To himself, he was a survivor still trapped on the battlefield. Hollywood soon came calling, promising him fame, fortune, and a fresh start. But as Audie would soon learn, no amount of applause could drown out the echoes of war that still lived inside him. When Audie Murphy returned from the war, he was hailed as a national treasure, the perfect symbol of American courage. But beneath the medals and ceremonies, he felt lost. He was only 20 years old, yet had lived through horrors that few could imagine. The country wanted a hero, but Murphy just wanted peace, something he would never truly find. At first, he tried to live quietly. He moved in with actor James Cagney, who admired him and encouraged him to try Hollywood. Cagney saw something in Audie, a natural screen presence, a quiet intensity that cameras loved. But Murphy didn't see himself as a movie star. "I'm a soldier," he said, "not an actor." Still, Cagney persisted, and soon Audie was screen-tested and signed to Universal Pictures. It didn't take long for the studio to realize they had struck gold. Audie's rugged charm, piercing blue eyes, and stoic demeanor made him a natural fit for westerns and war films. His real-life heroism gave him authenticity that no script could fake. In 1949, he starred in Bad Boy, a modest success that marked the start of a long acting career. But it was his 1955 film To Hell and Back that cemented his legend. The movie was based on his own autobiography, where Audie played himself. Reliving the very battles that had haunted his dreams for a decade, audiences were spellbound. Here was America's greatest war hero, portraying his own story of courage and sacrifice. The film became a massive hit, Universal's highest-grossing movie until Jaws 2 decades later. To the world, it was the ultimate triumph, the soldier who became a movie star. But to Audie, it was torture. Filming those scenes reopened old wounds. He once said that pretending to fight on camera was harder than doing it for real. Between takes, he would retreat to his trailer, shaking, sometimes breaking down in tears. The studio saw a disciplined professional. In truth, he was reliving the war every day. Off camera, Murphy's personal life was as troubled as his mind. He married actress Wanda Hendricks in 1949, but the marriage quickly fell apart. Wanda later revealed that Audie's nightmares were so violent that he would wake up screaming, sometimes reaching for a gun he kept by the bed. "He wasn't violent toward me," she said, "but he was fighting battles that no one could see." Their divorce in 1951 left him even more isolated. He later remarried Pamela Archer, a former airline stewardess who brought stability into his life, and together they had 2 sons. Pamela became his anchor, but even she couldn't fully reach the parts of Audie that were still stuck in Europe, the part of him that never came home. As his film career grew, so did the pressure. Hollywood wanted the smiling hero, not the haunted veteran. Audie played the roles they gave him: cowboys, soldiers, lawmen, each one a version of himself that the public wanted to see. Behind the camera, however, he was battling what we now know as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. But in the 1950s, PTSD didn't have a name. Back then, it was dismissed as battle fatigue or nerves. There were no treatments, no understanding, only silence. Murphy's friends noticed his temper, his restlessness, his inability to sleep. He avoided crowds, hated fireworks, and often spent nights pacing alone. In the privacy of his home, he began taking sleeping pills to quiet his mind. When that didn't work, he turned to gambling, not for money, but for distraction. The thrill of risk gave him brief relief from the emptiness inside. Still, Audie never lost his compassion. Despite his struggles, he spoke out for veterans, visiting hospitals and encouraging soldiers who returned home broken and forgotten. "They trained us to fight," he once said, "but they didn't train us to come home." It was one of the earliest public acknowledgments of what would later be recognized as PTSD, and it came from the man who embodied heroism itself. But Hollywood, as always, is a double-edged sword. Fame kept him working, but it also kept him trapped, forever forced to be America's hero. As the years passed, film offers dwindled, debts piled up, and his inner demons grew louder. He hid it well, too well. To the world, Audie Murphy was still the brave soldier, the tough cowboy, the man who never flinched. But the truth was far darker. Beneath the calm smile, Audie was slipping further into despair. He couldn't sleep, couldn't forget, couldn't stop fighting the ghosts that followed him everywhere. And in the years to come, those ghosts would lead him down a path that no one, not even the greatest hero of World War II, could survive. By the 1960s, Audie Murphy's shining image as America's hero had begun to crack. The once celebrated soldier and movie star was now facing a battle no medal could win, a battle against his own mind, his finances, and a world that had long moved on from the glory days of World War II. Fame had given Audie money, but it hadn't given him peace. Hollywood's golden years were fading, and new, younger stars were taking over the screens. Westerns, the genre that had defined his career, were losing their appeal. Audie, who had once commanded top billing, now found himself struggling to land roles. His income dwindled, yet his responsibilities and debts continued to grow. In private, Audie was haunted by restlessness. He tried his hand at business ventures, from ranching to investments in aircraft and technology, but most failed. He wasn't a businessman. He was a soldier, trying to fight battles he didn't understand. By the mid-1960s, he was deeply in debt and desperate to keep his financial troubles hidden from the public. To make matters worse, his gambling habits, developed years earlier as a distraction from insomnia and trauma, began to spiral out of control. Poker tables replaced battlefields as the place where he sought adrenaline. He gambled not for greed but for escape. Yet every hand he lost seemed to drag him further into darkness. His friends noticed the change. The confident war hero was now withdrawn, often quiet and brooding. He suffered from severe insomnia, nightmares, and paranoia. He kept loaded guns around the house, not out of vanity, but fear. Loud noises could send him into panic, and even in public, he would sit with his back to the wall, watching every entrance. In the era before therapy and medication for PTSD were widely available, Audie did what many veterans did. He suffered in silence. But that silence turned dangerous. Reports later suggested he began taking amphetamines and barbiturates to cope with exhaustion and anxiety, a dangerous mix that deepened his instability. Then came the legal troubles. In 1970, Audie Murphy was accused of assault after reportedly beating a dog trainer who had mistreated animals. While he was later acquitted, the headlines tarnished his clean-cut image. For the first time, America's perfect soldier was painted as violent and unpredictable. Behind closed doors, Murphy was deeply ashamed. He knew the public saw him as a symbol, and symbols weren't supposed to break. But Audie was breaking. He often said, "The real heroes are the ones who didn't come back." Those words weren't modesty, they were guilt. Survivor's guilt. Every night he relived the faces of his fallen brothers, asking himself why he had lived when so many others hadn't. Still, he tried to stay productive. He worked on small films, lent his voice to veterans' causes, and continued writing poetry and letters. His wife Pamela stood by him through it all, quietly enduring the emotional storms that defined their home life. She once said, "Audie carried the war with him." It never left his eyes. By 1971, Audie was financially broke and emotionally exhausted. He began traveling frequently, looking for business opportunities to rebuild his life. Friends later recalled he seemed calmer, as if he had finally made peace with something. But just as it appeared he might be turning a corner, tragedy struck. On May 28, 1971, Audie Murphy boarded a small private plane bound for Martinsville, Virginia, on a business trip. The weather that day was poor, heavy fog and rain, but the flight went ahead as planned. Somewhere over the Blue Ridge Mountains, the plane lost contact. Hours later, search teams found the wreckage scattered across Brush Mountain. All 6 people aboard, including Audie, were killed instantly. He was just 45 years old. The nation mourned. Flags were lowered, tributes poured in, and President Richard Nixon sent condolences to Murphy's widow. Yet beneath the official honors was a different kind of sorrow, the realization that America's most decorated hero had died not in battle, but in quiet struggle. Audie Murphy was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. His headstone, simpler than most, bears only his name, rank, and medals. He had once requested it that way, modest, unadorned, just like the man he truly was. Decades later, researchers and biographers would revisit his life, uncovering the extent of his trauma and mental anguish. They revealed a man who had given everything for his country, and in return had received a lifetime of pain. Audie Murphy's death was officially ruled an accident. But those who knew him best believed the true tragedy wasn't in the crash. It was in the years leading up to it. The mystery of his final days wasn't about how he died, but about how America's greatest hero had been quietly destroyed by the war that made him famous. Robert Wagner refuses to speak about his daughter to this day.